Fall Algebra 1 exam review. Okay, so we're just going to start going through these. Please remember you can pause the video as needed. So on the first one, we just need to simplify that expression, so we need to first distribute. The brackets and parentheses can be interchanged, so I'm just going to change that to parentheses, so negative 4x plus 12. Then I have to distribute the 2, so that would be negative 8x plus 24. For b part of number 1, once again, I need to distribute inside my parentheses. So I have 8 parentheses, 5 minus 2x minus 6. Then before I distribute that 8, I can actually combine like terms. So we have 8 parentheses, negative 2x minus 1. Then we have to distribute the 8. And so finally, the final answer would be negative 16x minus 8. For b, it's the same type problem. So we have to distribute. This time we need to distribute twice. So that minus is like distributing a negative 1. So we have 6x plus 12 minus 8x plus 3. Combine like terms. So we would have negative 2x plus 15. For b, we have to distribute again. So that would be 2x plus 6 minus 16x minus 40. Combine like terms. Negative 14x minus 34. For 3, we have function notation. H of x equals 4x squared minus 5x plus 2. Make sure whenever you are plugging in a negative number, especially, that you always put it in parentheses. Mainly because this negative 3 squared has to be done first. So that's actually 4 times 9. Then negative 5 times negative 3 is plus 15 plus 2, so 36 plus 15 plus 2 is going to equal 53. And then for b, we're going to use the same equation except plug in 4. So we would have 4 times 4 squared minus 5 times 4 plus 2. So 4 times 16 minus 20 plus 2. So 4 times 16 is 64. So that is going to end up being 46. Okay, number 4, determine if the product will be positive or negative. And you can tell just by looking by the number of negative numbers. So if there's an odd number of negatives, it's going to be negative. So if I count over here, I have 1, 2, 3 negatives. So that product will be negative. And I also answered C in doing those problems. So if you have an odd number of negatives, the product will be negative. So for number 5, we need to tell which equations are not linear and why they are not linear. Well, number 1, you have an x in the denominator. So that is not a linear equation. And then we have, if we check here, that's no problem. That's just the same as y equals 1/3 x. X equals 8 we know is a vertical line. Y equals negative 7 we know is a horizontal line, which are both linear. And then when we get to number 5, it is not linear because of this squared term. We check the rest of them. If your x and your y both are to the power of 1, and you don't have an x in the denominator, it should be linear. Now for b, your answers are going to vary. The easiest way to make it non-linear is if your variable does not equal 1. So you could say y equals x squared plus 2, y equals x cubed plus 4. So anything where your variable is not 1 on the x that is in the same form, would work. And then for B, you could look back up at any of those that we didn't circle, would be great examples of linear functions. Okay, number 6, the cost of renting a canoe is $7.50 plus 75 cents per hour for the time that the canoe is out. Which equation could be used to find C, the cost in dollars for using the canoe H hours? How long can someone rent a canoe if they have $10.50? Well, the $7.50 is just a one-time charge, but then it's 75 cents for every hour that you have the canoe. So there should be a variable with the 75 cents, but not the 750. So we can eliminate some answer choices that way. So I'm looking for, well, I don't see any good ones to eliminate. So I'm just going to write the equation. So we have $7.50 plus 75 cents per hour is the total cost. So and now I'm going to go ahead and if I have $10.50, I'm going to plug that in and solve. So $7.50 plus 75 cents per hour. If it equals $10.50, and I'm going to do my math and see how long it will take, or how long I can. Okay, so if we take 3 and we divide it by 75 cents per hour, we could rent the canoe for 4 hours. So now we could definitely eliminate a couple of answers. So 2 and 3. And then we need to see which one matches, and then you can tell number 4 matches. Lisa set aside $450 for gas money this semester. Filling up her car costs $24 per tank. Write an equation for the amount of gas money remaining, G, after she fills her tank T times. Then determine the amount of gas money she has left after she fills the tank 8 times. So in this case, we are going to say that the amount of money she has remaining, they told us to call that G, is going to equal, well, we know she starts out with $450, but then we're going to subtract $24 for every time she fills up her tank. So in this case, so that's our equation, and then if we want to know how much she has left after she fills her tank 8 times, we're going to plug in 8 to T. So G equals 450 minus 24 times 8. And whenever we solve that, we end up with $258. Okay, for 7, we have to write these equations. 1/2 the difference between x cubed and 12 is twice y. So when we have 1/2 of the difference between x cubed and 12, so we have to take the difference, x cubed minus 12, but we want half of that. So we need to show that with parentheses. Is always means equal. Twice y just means 2 times y. And if you wrote the 2y on the other side, that's fine too. For B, it says triple the sum of a squared and 4 equals 4y. So if we need to actually triple the sum of a squared and 4, we have to use the same technique because we have a squared plus 4, but we want to triple that. So we would have to use parentheses and put a 3 on the outside so that we know to distribute that. And that's going to equal 4y. Number 8, and you can write this on your graph. I'm just going to point and talk about the graph. So if we want to describe the speed of the car over a certain range of time, we can say that from 0 to 5 seconds, the car is slowing down. You could just write from 0 to 5 seconds, the car slows down. Then from 5 to 10 seconds, it remains at a constant speed. It remains a constant speed. Okay, and then finally, from 10 to 15 seconds, the car is slowing down to a stop. And you can see at 15 seconds it's stopping. Okay, and then B part of 8, match the description with the graph. Write a description for the unused graph. So if we have a person's body temperature as he enters the sauna and then cools down in a jacuzzi. So in this case, we know whenever we get into, well, normally we have, and I'm looking at number 2 here, we have a constant temperature, but we know whenever we get in the sauna that our temperature is going to increase. Then if we get in the jacuzzi to cool off, it's going to decrease real fast, and then it'll eventually even back out. So the answer for X would be number 2. Then for Y, the rise and fall of an elevator as it carries passengers from the ground floor to the observation tower. So we know in this case the elevator is going to go up and down, and that's exactly what this graph does over a certain period of time. So Y is 3. Then the cost to mail a package based on the weight. So in this case, we have these increments. So if it weighs a certain amount, it's going to cost this price. If it weighs another amount, or the next poundage up, it would be this price. And then it would keep going up in increments. So D is 4. If we wanted to write an equation for number 1, we could say anything that is decreasing over a certain period of time, and the answers are going to vary. So number 9, we have to solve. So now we're not just simplifying because we have that equal sign. So I like to put my variables together first. So X would equal 13 over 11. Over here, I'm going to minus X first. So X would equal 5 for 9B. Number 10, we have to solve for both of these equations. And these are called literal equations because there's more than one variable. So if we need to solve for n in A, that means I need to get n on the side by itself. So the first thing I need to move away is the 42. Sorry. So I'm going to minus 42 on both sides. So on the left side, I just start out with m minus 42 equals negative 3/7 n. Well, to get rid of a fraction in front of a variable, you would have to multiply by the reciprocal. So negative 7/3, negative 7/3. And this next part is where that hint comes in at the top, because you're not just multiplying the negative 7/3 by m, you're actually multiplying it by everything on that left-hand side, which is where the distribution comes in. Please don't forget to do that. So we would end up with negative 7/3 m plus, and then you could cross reduce. 3 will go into 42 14 times, and then negative 7 times 4, or excuse me, we already know it's positive, so 7 times 14 is 98. So that would be n, and you're more than welcome to rewrite it with the variable on the left. We need to do the same thing for B. Remember, you can pause this video at any time and work ahead and then check your answer. So we need to plus 30 on both sides if we're trying to get B by itself. So A plus 30 equals 5 over 12B. Now we need to multiply by the reciprocal. Multiply by 12 over 5. I like to also go ahead, just like I did before, and add those parentheses because that kind of helps me remember that I need to distribute. So now we would have 12 over 5a plus, and if we cross reduce, 5 will go into 30, 6 times 12 times 6 is going to be 72. Okay, for 11, same thing we did a little bit earlier. We just have to we have to solve for x. Now, this case, the distribution is at the end. Doesn't change how we do it. So we have 18 plus 12x equals, and then in this case, this is like distributing a negative 1. So we would have 10 minus 9x minus 1. Combine like terms, so we would have 18 plus 12x equals negative 9x plus 9. I'm going to get my x's together first. Wrong place. So 18 plus 21x equals 9. So 21x equals negative 9. And if we can simplify that, x is going to equal, so we can reduce negative 9 over 12, so that would be negative 3 over 4. Alright, sorry guys, I just realized I accidentally put a 12 instead of a 21, so I apologize. So we have to divide by 21, probably because I was trying to squish it up. And so now if we reduce, and we can still divide both of those by 3, so it would be negative 3 over 7. Then for b, this is a proportion, so the first thing we need to do is cross multiply. I like to put parentheses around it whenever you have two terms. So I'm going to cross multiply, so negative 4 times x plus 5 equals 7 times x. Then I need to distribute. So now plus 4x on both sides. So negative 20 equals 11x. So x equals negative 20 over 11. For number 12, we need to find the y-intercept for both a and b. Anytime you have ordered pairs, you always want to look, if you're looking for the y-intercept, that's always going to look like 0, comma, and then I put a y just because it's going to be some number. So hopefully you realize that this is going to be your y-intercept. 0, 3 is going to be your y-intercept. B, you just have a table. So you are looking for when x is 0, which is going to be 0, negative 8. Now, if for some reason you could not find the 0 as x on your table or in your ordered pairs, it would be very easy to do a linear regression and find the y-intercept of either of those. On number 13, we need to find the domain and range. On number 13, since there's an arrow going to the left, I'm going to start on the far right. There's a closed circle at that 5, and then there's an arrow going to the left. The domain is going to be x is less than or equal to 5. Now I've got to find the range. So I'm going to start at the top since my arrow is going down. And I'm even at 2. And then I go down forever because of that arrow. So the range is y is less than or equal to 2. For b, I can start on the left or the right in this case. So I'm going to start on the left. So I have an open circle at negative 5. Then I'm in line with my graph until I get right here. So I have another open circle because that's what I have on my graph. So I just need to write a compound inequality for that red graph that I just made on the x-axis. So I can say that x is greater than negative 5 and x is less than negative 2. Now you can use the shortcut method, put the x in the middle, negative 2 on the right, -5 on the left. It only works if your numbers are in numerical order, and then it's going to be your inequalities are going to point towards the left. Those are the exact same answers. Then for the range, I'm going to start at the bottom. You can start at the top. And I'm going to start with an open circle at -4. And then I go up, up, up until I get to 4. And then I have an open circle at 4. So we have y is greater than -4 and y is less than 4. I can also use my shortcut on that one. So I could put the y in the middle, -4 on the left, 4 on the right, and then your signs are going to point towards the left. Those are both open circles, so I make sure to not put the or equal to part. And then finally on C, I'm going to start with my domain. Since my arrow is pointing towards the right, I need to start towards the left. I make sure I don't pick my pencil up or off of the x-axis, so I start with an open circle at -4, and then I go forever to the right, so the domain's going to be x is greater than -4. Then I have to do the range since the arrow is going up. So notice, whenever I'm dealing with the range, I talk about up or down. When I'm dealing with the domain, I talk about left or right. So with the range, it's pointing up, so I start at the bottom. I come up till I'm even with my graph, so I'm even right here. And then I go up forever and ever. So the range is going to be y is greater than -1. Okay, we need the slope of these two equations, and the easiest way to get slope is to put it in slope-intercept form, so we have to solve for y. Remember, when you're writing slope-intercept form, I wouldn't write -24 minus 6x, even though technically it's not wrong, but go ahead and slide that -6x so that once you divide by -8 and you rewrite, it should be, so that is 6/8, which reduces to 3/4. I just reduced that fraction, plus 3, and the only piece that I need, my slope, is 3/4. Over here, we're going to do the same thing. I can't reduce this fraction, so my fraction is just -4/5. And we need to calculate the slope given 2 points, and you will be allowed to have your EOC chart on the exam, so you can always refer to it if you need to. But the slope is y2 minus y1, so that's -7 minus -3 over x2 minus x1, so -2 minus -1. There's a lot of places to make careless mistakes when you have a lot of negatives like this. Those double negatives become pluses. So -4 over -1, which is just a +4 for the slope. Then for the next one, same thing. So our slope would be -5. 16, write the domain and range of the table below. So in this case, we just need to write our solution set. So our domain would be all the x values, and you just have to list them out. Then for the range, you don't have to repeat numbers if they are repeated when you're just writing the domain and range. I don't have to repeat -1 or -2 or -4, so technically I can stop right there with my range. It's not wrong if you write it, just know if it's a multiple choice test that they probably won't be on there. For B, same thing. Now in this case, make sure that you write the correct domain and range, because for domain, you should be looking for x values. So that's another place I would use my x-axis to help me. So I would have an x value at these little blue marks that I'm making. And then I'm just going to look there. So I would have starting at 1, 2, 3. I would have 1 at 3, at 2, at 0, at -1, at -2, -3, and -4. Then for my y values, I would look at my range values, I would look at my y-axis. So I have one here, 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 and here. So I just made a little mark so I would know what y values to write down for my range. So I have 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so we need to find the slope, the y-intercept, and the x-intercept for each of these. Well, the first one's in slope-intercept form, so I can see two of those pieces of information. The slope is -3, the y-intercept is -5, so I just need to find my x-intercept. We remember that our x-intercept, the equation looks like that. That tells me I need to plug in 0 for y. So I can say 0 equals -3x minus 5. So -5 equals -3x. So x equals 5/3. And that is our x-intercept. For the next one, it is not in slope-intercept form, so I can't see anything until I divide through by -2. So I have y equals 2x minus 6, so I can see my slope is 2, my y-intercept is -6. Then if I need my x-intercept, I can do the exact same thing. 0 equals 2x minus 6. And if we solve, x equals 3, and that is our x-intercept. 18, the domain of a function, g of x equals 6x minus 3 is 2, 3, 4, and 5. Write the range, and we're going to have to do that twice. You may want to grab your calculator for this one. There's really two ways to do it, and they're both doing the same thing. You could take all of these are x values. That's what the fact that it tells you the domain are those numbers. So you could take those and you could plug them in for x to get your y values. But I'm going to show you something that will save a little time. So if you go to your y equals and you plug in the equation 6x minus 3, and if you go to your table, and I'm at 25, so remember if I need to jump to a lower value because I need to go to 2, I'm going to go to second window, and I'm going to type in that I want to go to 2. Then I go back to my graph. I can actually write down, so what this is saying is, when I plug in a 2 for x, I get out a 9. When I plug in a 3 for x, I get out a 15. So it's doing the work for you, but it's mostly for us a time saver. So I'm going to write here that the range, so when x is 2, y is 9, and I need to go 3, 4, and 5. So I can say 9, 15, 21, 27, and I'm going to use that same method on the next one. Like I said, you should know how to do it by hand, but mainly for time's sake, -2x plus 5. We look back at our table, and this time I need to go to -1, and when I look across, the y value is 7. So my range is 7. If I go to 0, it would be 5. Then I got to go to 2, would be 1. And then finally 5, it would be -5. Okay, if y varies directly with x, or if y varies directly with x and y is 60 when x is 16, write an equation relating x and y. Well, remember this is one equation that is not on your chart. Y equals kx. And if you're given what a y and an x is, so y is 60 when x is 16, you can plug it in and find k. So we have 60 equals k times 16. So if we divide by 16, we end up with k equals, let's see, if we divide that by 4, 15 over 4, and then so that's how we find k. And when it says write an equation relating x and y, that I just need to take that 15 over 4 and plug it back into y equals kx, just like that. So y equals 15 over 4x. I need to do the exact same thing for b. So I've got my equation above, so I'm going to say 52 equals k times 10. So if we solve for k is going to equal, and you could write that 5.2 if you wanted to, but I'm going to leave it as a fraction. So that's actually going to be 26 over 5. And then we can take that and plug it back in. And that would be our equation relating x and y. Then for 20, write the nth term for each sequence using the formula a sub n equals a sub 1 plus n minus 1 times d. And be sure to simplify our answer, and then we want to find the 100th term. So to use this formula, the one thing that we have to find out is the common difference. And the common difference in this first one is a minus 5. So when I start to plug in to find the nth term, a sub n equals, now the a sub 1 is our first term, so that's going to be 40, then plus n minus 1 times d, which is negative 5. You have to be careful here because this is, and I'm going to put in parentheses, I'm going to have to distribute that negative 5. That's what it means to simplify my answer. So we have a sub n equals 40. Then negative 5 times n is minus 5n. Negative 5 times negative 1 is plus 5. Now we can simplify. So a sub n equals negative 5n plus 45. Then if we want to find a sub 100, which means the 100th term, I need to plug in 100 for n, because you'll notice that's what's taking the place of n. So I would have a sub 100 equals negative 5 times 100 plus 45. So when we simplify that, so 500 plus 45, so a sub 100 would equal negative 455. Then for b, we do the exact same thing. Go ahead and pause the video because I'm going to pause it, work it out, and then restart the video. Okay, check your work. Okay, 21, find the value of x that will make x, comma, negative 2 a solution for 3x minus 2y equals 19. Well, if they're giving me a y value, I just need to take that y value and plug it in that equation and solve for the x value. So 3x minus 2 times negative 2 equals 19. So 3x plus 4 equals 19. So if we subtract 4 from both sides, that's going to give us 3x equals 15. And if we divide by 3, x would be 5. We do the same thing on b, except this time we're given an x value and we need to find the y value. So we need to plug in that x value. So 6y plus 2 times negative 5 equals negative 22. So 6y minus 10 equals negative 22. So if we plus 10, we would have, and I'm sorry for going to the left, we would have 6y equals negative 12, and y would equal negative 2. For 22 and 23, we need to graph, so we have to put them in the easiest form to graph, and that would be slope-intercept form. You're also welcome to graph using the x and y intercepts if you would like to. I personally like to graph using slope-intercept form. So I'm just manipulating it to slope-intercept form. So I start at 6 on the y-axis, and my slope is -5/2, so I'm going to go down 5, right 2. And I'm going to do it again, just have a nice line. And same thing over here. Start at +3. Slope is 2/1, because remember you can always put your slope over 1, so up 2, right 1, up 2, right 1. Don't forget, if you don't have enough room, you can always go down 2, left 1, because 2 negative directions actually makes positive. And there is our second equation. Okay, 23, shows the input and output of a function relationship. Write an equation in function notation. The easiest way to do this is in your calculator, if you have a graph. So I'm going to go to stat, because we need to make an equation from a table. This is usually our best bet. So my table, I'm going to clear that out. Don't forget and accidentally hit delete and delete the whole thing. So I'm going to enter in 3, 4, 5, 6. Then my y values are 0, 0, 2, 4, 6. Now we go back to stat, because we actually need to calculate this time. So arrow to the right. Number 4, arrow down. Even though we don't need to make a prediction this time, I would get in the habit of doing alpha trace. And if we calculate, we end up with y equals 2x minus 6. Remember, if you're not getting your r values, which we don't need in this case, I actually found an easier place to go and turn it on. If you go to mode and you arrow down, you are going to see stat diagnostics, and right now it's off. So I'm going to turn it on for the next one, and we'll remind ourselves what that looks like. So I need to go to stat edit, because I need to put in my new numbers, and I'm just going to type over. So -3, -1, 1, 3. And then we have -17, -11, -5, and 1. Then I have to go through, actually I see a mistake. I accidentally hit too many 1s. Make sure they're right, double check my table. Now I'm going to do stat calc, so arrow to the right, number 4. When I get to store regression equation, alpha trace, and my equation would be y equals 3x minus 8. And just as a reminder, if r is 1, that means that is a perfectly straight line. 24, what value of x would make the relation not a function? Remember, if it's not a function, that means it has a repeating x value. So any one of these x's that are already here, if you had a 0, a 1, a 2, or excuse me, a 1, a 3, or a 5 here for this x, it would not be a function. So any value other than, which would make it not a function. So any one of these values, if it were here for x, would make it not a function. So you would say 0, 1, 3, 4, 5. Then for b, it's the same type question. Which values of x would make the relation, which would make it a function? So it's the opposite. So I need to pick one that is not one of those 4. So I could not pick 0, 1, 5, 7. 0, 1, 5, 7. So 0, 1, so 0, 1, 5, 7. I can't pick 0, so 3 would make it a function, or excuse me, 4 and 3 would make it a function because I don't already have one of those values. And then 25, write two equations to represent the parent linear function. Well, parent linear function is y equals x. You can always write that in function notation, f of x equals x. And then we're going to graph and list all the properties of the parent linear function. Well, remember, the parent linear function goes through 0, and the slope is 1. So here is the parent linear function. And some of the properties would be that the slope is 1, the y-intercept is 0. It is a direct variation because it goes through 0. And one other one I can think of is that it is proportional, which also means that it goes through 0. And that's it for the first half of the review. The last 25 problems will be on a second video. This is the second half of the Algebra 1 exam review, starting with number 26. So we have direct variation if y varies directly with x and y is 60 when x is 16. Find y when x is 10. So first thing you have to have memorized is the direct variation equation, which is y equals kx. It is not on your formula chart. Well, then if it gives you y and x, we can plug that in and find k. So we would say 60 equals k times 16. If we divide by 16, k is going to equal, let's see, that would be 30 over 8, 15 over 4 whenever we reduce. Then we can use that same equation, but this time we're going to use the fact that x equals 10, and we're going to use our k, and we're going to plug into y equals kx again. So we would have y equals k, which is 15 over 4, times 10. So y equals, if you could cross reduce, or you can just multiply, and then you could reduce. So 75 over 2. And 75 over 2 is also 37.5, is also a good answer. Then if we do the exact same thing, you're going to use that equation, y equals kx. And it says y is 52 when x is 10. So we would have 52 equals k times 10. And if we solve for k, k is going to equal, if we do 52 divided by 10, and we reduce that, we get 26 over 5. Then we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to say when x equals 10, so it's the same x value, so we would say y equals k, which is 26 over 5, times 10. Here I will cross reduce because 5 will go into 10 two times. So y equals 52. Oh, and I just realized that it tells you right there x is 10, so that's a great proof as well. 27, which situations would produce continuous data? So continuous, you want to look for something that is constant. So something constant or consistent, well, if you are going at an average rate of 10 miles per hour, that is something that is a constant rate. The amount that Chris has in his bank account, if he spends half of his money each month, be careful with that word half, because it sounds like it would be consistent, but it's really not. So for instance, a good example would be if I started with $20 in my bank account, Well, if I spend half one month, then I would have 10. So that means in the first month, I spent $10. Well, then half of 10 is 5. So the second month, I only spent $5. And you can see that my spending per month is not a constant rate. So half is not a continuous situation. Number 3, the number of jet skis rented on the beach each day. Well, that's definitely inconsistent because we never know. The number of cow legs versus the number of cows on a farm. So 4 would actually be discrete because you can't take the number of cows' legs and cut it in half. So for B, give an example of a non-example that will have continuous data. Anything that is continuous can be cut in half, and anything that is discrete, you cannot cut in half. 28, write and solve a system of equations for each problem. We need to do this for 28A and B. So adult tickets for a movie are $8. Children 12 and under pay $3 per ticket. For a screening, 135 tickets were sold, making $780. How many adult and child tickets were sold? So in this case, we need to define our variables. So I'm going to call A is the number of adult tickets, and C is going to stand for the number of children's tickets. Now, in this one, we have a quantity and we have a value. So the number of total tickets that were sold is 135. So we know the number of adult tickets plus the number of children's tickets has to equal 135. Then if we add a value, so we know that they totaled $780, but now instead of just A plus C, we have to put the value with them. So the adult tickets were $8. So 8 times the adult tickets plus 3 times the children's tickets would equal 780. So now this sets up for elimination. So I need to make something eliminate. So I'm going to multiply this top equation by -3. So that is going to be -3A minus 3C equals -405. So now I have my C's will eliminate. So we have 5A equals $375. So the number of adult tickets would be 75. Now we can take that information and we can plug it back in. The easiest place to plug it back in would be that top original equation for A. So we would have 75 plus C equals 135. And then if we subtract 75 from both sides, we would get 60. So there were 75 adult tickets sold and 60 children's tickets sold. For B, we had 78 seats for a consult are sold, producing a total revenue of $483. If seats cost either $2.50 or $10.50, how many $2.50 seats and how many $10.50 seats were sold? So in this case, I'm going to let X equal my $2.50 ticket and Y equal my $10.50 tickets. So the total number was 78, so that has to be X plus Y is 78. Then we have our $2.50 tickets plus our $10.50 times every ticket equals $483. And if you want to get rid of those decimals, you can by moving the decimal twice on each term in that one. But since it's not that difficult of a decimal, I'm just going to work with it. So I'm going to multiply everything through by -250 on the top equation. And I'm going to pause to do that. Okay, so now I have opposites that I can eliminate. So that is going to be 8y equals 288. And then if we divide by 8, we get y equals 36. So, and I need to look back, and y is the $10.50 ticket, so I'm going to make a note that there were 36 $10.50 tickets sold. Then I just have to take that information, and the easiest place to plug it in is right there. So I'm going to say x plus 36 equals 78. So if we subtract 36, x, which is the $2.50 tickets, there would be 42 of those sold. Okay, 29. What is the relationship between 3x minus 6y equals 18 and 2y equals x minus 6? Well, for us to know this, we need to put them in the same form. The easiest form is slope-intercept. So we need to get the y on the same, or on the side by itself. So y equals, that's going to reduce to 1/2. And then that's going to be 1/2 x minus 3. Now on the second one, I just have to divide through by 2, and then my y will be on the side by itself. So y equals 1/2 x minus 3. So be careful on this one, because you may notice immediately that they have the same slopes, which is great because you're thinking, oh, well, they're parallel. But when you double check their y-intercept, they also have the same y-intercept, so they would be the same line. For the next one, part B, given the line y equals 4x minus 5, we want to write an equation for a parallel line going through the point 0, 2. Well, hopefully you recognize that this is your y-intercept, and for parallel you should be thinking same slope. So the slope of that line is 4, so I know I'm going to use 4 as my slope, 2 as my y-intercept. So very quickly I can write y equals 4x plus 2. The second one, write an equation for a perpendicular line going through this point. Well, once again, this is our y-intercept because the x is 0. Perpendicular means opposite reciprocal slope, so I can't just use the 4. I have to flip it, which is 1/4, and change the sign. So the slope that I would use for part 2 is negative 1/4. So y equals negative 1/4 x minus 8. 3, write an equation of a line that is neither parallel nor perpendicular to that equation. So the most important thing here is that it doesn't have the same slope, and it doesn't have opposite reciprocal slope. So you could pick y equals 3x plus 5. I just randomly chose those numbers. As long as your slope is not 4 or negative 1/4, your answer should be correct. Lastly, we're going to write this equation in standard form. So if it's in slope-intercept form like now, we have to take the x term and move it to the front. So minus 4x. Then you can't have a negative in the front when you're dealing with standard form. So we would either divide or multiply through by negative 1, which will change all of our signs. So that would be standard form. For 30, we're going to graph a line through the point negative 2, negative 5, and 3, 5. What happens to the line if the slope is halved and the y-intercept stays the same? So first, we need to graph those 2 points. So negative 2, negative 5. Then I need 3, 5. So there's my line. And it says, what happened to the lines if the slope is halved? Well, first of all, I actually need to count my slope. So I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I went up 10. And then right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the slope of that line is 2. Well, if you half 2, that would just be 1. So now let's go from the same point. The y-intercept stays the same. Well, let's actually make sure we have the exact y-intercept so that we can move from that. So if I go up 2, right 1, up 2, right 1, there's my y-intercept. So that's where I'm going to start for my second equation, where my slope is going to be 1. So if I go up 1, right 1, I can see that my line is going to get less steep. Then for B, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start out by graphing that line, so negative 5, 0. Then I have 10, 2. So here's the line. And once I count my slope, and this time the slope is going to triple and the y-intercept stays the same. So first thing I'm going to do is count my slope. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 10 over 7. And then, oops, I just realized I graphed, sorry guys. I just realized I did the negative 5, 0 correctly, but then I accidentally went up 10 first when I should have went out 10 and then up 2. So I apologize. So there's my line. Now I'm going to count my slope. Up 2 and then right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I went up 2, right 15. And if I triple that, so that means I'm going to multiply times 3. That will be 6 over 15, which reduces to 2/5. Now in this case, it's going to be a little bit harder to have your y-intercept. So you may actually want to grab a ruler, and I'm going to see if I can make this line better so that I can have my exact or pretty close to my y-intercept. So that's what I have there. So I'm just going to make sure I start as close to that y-intercept as possible. Then I'm going to go up 2, so up 2, right 5. Up 2. And you can see, just from that little bit, that the line is going to get steeper. For 31, we want to know whether or not these are functions or not. So the main thing we're looking for is, if it's a function, is does it have a repeated x value? So if it is in a mapping diagram, then if it has more than one arrow, then it is not a function. So this would be not a function. For B, each x value only has one arrow, so this would be a function. Same thing for C, that would be a function. Here, I would just need to check that I only have, actually for this one, I could use my vertical line test. So you can take your pencil, and I'm going to get a vertical line here. So here's my vertical line, and you just drag it across, and as long as it doesn't touch, right there, 2 points at the same time, so D would be not a function. I can already tell if I grab my vertical line here. Maybe. So there it is. So E would also not be a function because in 2 places it touches more than one dot at a time. And F would be a function. So this one is not a function. and the f is a function. Whenever you have a table, you're looking for input values that are the same and you don't have any there, so that would be a function. Here, your 1's repeat and so do your 2's repeat. So h would be not a function. I'm looking for x values that repeat and I don't see any, so that is a function. Then for j, right here I have 3's that repeat, so that is not a function. We're going to graph on 32 f of x equals 3x. Remember that just is f of x is a way to write a y. And remember, that's like having a y-intercept of 0. So we start at 0, we go up 3, right 1. Or down 3, left 1. Then for the next one, our y-intercept is 2. And our slope is -5. So we go down 5, right 1. And here's our line. So for 33, we have a change in temperature graph. So if we want to know the starting temperature, we just look at where our graph starts, which is also our y-intercept. So if we look right here, started out at 60 degrees. Actually, excuse me, be careful because I need to look right here for y, or my time 0. So 50 degrees. What is the rate of change? So I need to calculate. So if I'm here at 50, I go down 10 degrees, and then I go to the right 1. So you have to be careful. So I went down 10 and then right 1. And if you want to put units with this, I went down 10 degrees Fahrenheit every 1 hour. Then if we want the equation of the line, the easiest way to do that would be to take our slope and our y-intercept, which we have on A and B, and plug it into slope-intercept form. So y equals -10x plus 50. For 34, the slope of each line. So for 1, I hope you remember Vux, and it has an undefined slope. Number 2 is Hoy, so it has a 0 slope. Here you have to be careful on 3 because you cannot tell what the slope is until it is in y equals mx plus b form. So the slope of number 3 is 1/3. And then the slope of 4 is -3. On B, the equation and slope of a vertical line. So vertical, I immediately think of Vux. So I know that the equation is going to be x equals, and you could say x equals a because a is any number. And the slope is going to be undefined. For 35, we need to write those two equations in standard form. They are both in slope-intercept form, so the first thing you have to do is get the x term to the front. So we're going to minus 3/7 x. So that's what we start out with. So -3/7 x plus y equals -5/14. Now in standard form, you can't have a negative in the front and you can't have a fraction anywhere. So the way we can get rid of both of those at the same time is look at your denominators and pick the common denominator, which would be 14. Since this first term is negative, if you multiply through everything by -14, you will take care of the negative and the fraction all at the same time. So that would be a 6x minus 14y equals 5. Then for B, same steps. We would start out by minusing 3/4 x. Then if we look in here, our least common denominator out of a 4 and a 6 would actually be a 12. So I'm going to multiply through by a negative 12 to get rid of that negative in front. So if I cross reduce, the negatives cancel, and then 4 will go into 12. 3 times 3x is 9x minus 12y equals 10. 36, write an equation in point-slope form that passes through each pair of points. So in this case, you have to find the slope first. That formula is on your chart if you need it. You can also label your points if you need to. So the slope of the first line is negative 5 over negative 3, which is just 5/3. And next you need to pick a point, and either point will work. I'm just going to pick the second point. So we would say y minus 3 equals 5/3 parentheses x minus negative 5. And then the only thing that you would need to clean up is change that double negative to a plus. And just to clean it up, I'm going to rewrite it. So there's the point slope form. You're welcome to use the other point as well. So same thing on B. Our slope is negative 4 minus 3 over 6 minus negative 5. So negative 7 over 11. Pick a point. I'm just going to pick negative 5/3. So y minus 3 equals negative 7 over 11 times x minus negative 5. Change that to a plus and then rewrite to clean it up. 37, write an equation that would be parallel and translated downward from the given line. Well, parallel to me means have the same slope. So that means I am going to keep this slope. But whenever it's translated downward, that means it needs to, the y-intercept needs to be lower than a 6. So anything below 6 would work. So I could say y equals negative 0.75x. You could say plus 5 because that's lower than 6. So any number lower than 6 will work for your y-intercept. Same thing on B, parallel, so we keep the same slope, 0.2, and then we want something that is translated upward from negative 33. So any number higher than negative 33 will work. You could say plus 2. You could say negative 15. Anything higher than negative 33. 38, write an equation for a line that is perpendicular to the given lines and passes through point A. So first thing we need to do is we need to calculate the slope of the line that we have. So if I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, the slope of that line is 4/3. But when you see perpendicular, you should think opposite reciprocal. So my new line has to have a slope of negative 3/4. The point that I am dealing with is negative 1, 2, 3, 1. And then I can just use that information to write an equation. So I would say y minus 1 equals negative 3/4 times x minus negative 3. Notice I started out in point slope form because that's the two pieces of information that I had. Y minus 1 equals negative 3/4 times x plus 3. I need to distribute. I'm going to go to slope-intercept form. So y minus 1 equals negative 3/4 x minus 9 over 4. And then if you plus 1 on both sides, you end up with y equals negative 3/4 minus x minus 5/4. So notice your y-intercept is not a whole number, so you wouldn't be able to use your graph really to help you. Then we do the exact same thing on the second one. So if I count my slope, it would be down 2, and then right 1, 2, 3, 4. So the slope of that line is -1/2, but we want our line to be perpendicular, so the opposite reciprocal of -1/2 is just 2. Now here we can do the exact same thing. So I find this point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2. So I use that point and slope of 2 to write my new equation. So y minus 2 equals 2 times x minus 4, and then we just solve for slope-intercept form. And there's our equation in slope-intercept form. 39, Robbie wants to take piano lessons. The registration fee is $50 and each lesson is $75. Write an inequality to determine the number of piano lessons, P, he can attend if he wants to spend no more than T dollars total. So in this case, I'm going to think of it as he wants to spend less than the total number of dollars. And I'm kind of thinking of it that way because that's the way it was worded in the sentence. I can always rewrite it in a different order if I need to. So the registration fee is $50 plus $75 for every lesson, which they called P, and we want that to be less than the total amount he wants to spend. And it looks like all we have to do is write the inequality. Then same thing for the second one. Jenna wants to join a gym. Registration fee is $15 and each class is $25. Write an inequality to determine the number of classes C she can take to attend if she wants to spend no more than D dollars. So same thing, no more than D dollars. So the registration is $15 plus $25 for every class, and that has to be less than the total amount that she wants to spend. For 40, these are just inequalities that we need to solve. Remember, whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number and it's an inequality, you have to flip the inequality. And then for B, so -4, I have to flip my sign, and then X. Now be careful here because I flipped because I divided by a negative, but now I'm just going to rewrite. So I'm going to switch the X and the -4. My inequality is pointing towards my X, so I just need to make sure it's pointing towards my X whenever I rewrite. Now for 41, the only difference is now we have to graph. So if we look at A, we have y is greater than -14. Make sure when you do your graphs, you do them the way your teacher wants you to. So they may require more numbers than this. But I'm going to indicate -14 on my graph because it's just greater than. It's an open circle. And then greater than -14 is to the right. For B, I need to -6. So -2x is less than or equal to -14. Because I'm dividing by -2, I have to flip my inequality. And I am going to graph. So I've indicated 7. Since it's greater than or equal to, I need to have a closed circle. Then I need to shade to the right. For 42, I need to write an inequality for each of those. I like to do these as a fill in the blank for slope-intercept form, as long as I can see everything I need to on my graph. So I would start out y. I put a box for my inequality, then a blank for my slope, and then x, and then a blank for my y-intercept. So the first thing I like to find is my y-intercept, which is -4. My slope, I need to find another point, so I go up 2, right 1, so my slope is 2. It is shaded below, and it's a solid line, so that is less than or equal to. And if I do the same thing for these, I have y. I'm going to have to fill in my inequality. So my y-intercept is a 1, so plus 1. My slope is up 1, right 2, so 1/2. My inequality, it's shaded above, so I know it's greater than, and because it's a dashed line, you do not put the little line under it for or equal to. Then for C, my y-intercept is -2. Slope, got to find 2 points, so I go up 3, left 1, so that's going to be 3 over -1, which is just -3. Then my shading is greater than, and it's dashed, so I just put greater than. For 43, if we graph that inequality, hopefully you're thinking of HOI, so that it's a horizontal line. So I'm going to go to where y is -3, horizontal, and it is dashed. And it's greater than, so you would shade above that line. For B, x is less than or equal to -2, so I go to -2 on the x-axis, and I start there. And I'm thinking of VUX, so it's going to be vertical line. It has or equal to, so that is a solid boundary line. And then less than is shaded to the left, because all of those numbers are less than -2. 44, which are not functions. So this, once again, you can use your vertical line test. So just take your pencil and hold it across. If it touches 2 spots at the same time, like right here, it is not a function. For B, at this point, if you were to draw a straight line, that is not a function. This, a horizontal line, you would never touch anywhere twice, so that is a function. A vertical line definitely fails the vertical line test, so that is not a function. This part that drops makes it not a function here. And then this wavy graph, if you run your pencil across, never touches 2 points twice, so it would be a function. 45 are compound inequalities, and these specifically are ands. And I'm going to solve using the shortcut method, where I just have to make sure I do the same thing 3 times. So -12 is less than or equal to 3p is less than 15. And then if I divide every term by 3, so -4 is less than or equal to p is less than 5. If I'm going to graph, I'm going to indicate both of those values on my graph. Then you can either rewrite it to where it is written with the word and, or you can just read from the middle. So p is less than 5, so that's going to be open circle, and less than is going to be that way I put that small tail. And then I'm going to see, ands normally go in, so I'm going to see if this is a normal and. And then p is greater than or equal to -4. So closed circle, and then greater than would be to the right, and so it does meet in the middle. Now for B, we have to subtract 4 on all sides. Then when you divide through by -7, you have to flip your signs. Even though it's a compound inequality, that's something that is easy to forget. So whenever we simplify, so I have, that's 1, and then this is going to be -2. Be careful whenever you graph. Because we had to flip the signs, it's definitely not normal. So I put -2, 1. Make sure you always put those in numerical order. So if I read from the middle, C is greater than or equal to 2. So that is closed, going to the right. And then C is less than 1. So that is open, less than to the left. And so there's our graphed inequality. 46. To have a gym membership, you must pay a registration fee plus a regular monthly fee. The table shows the amount a person pays, including the registration fee for different number of months of membership. We want to know what is the registration fee, what is the monthly fee, and then we also want to know what an equation would be that would model the situation. Well, the easiest thing to do is to get an equation in slope-intercept form, because this will tell us, the B will tell us what the registration fee is, the slope will tell us what the monthly fee is. And the easiest way to do this would be to use our calculator and do a linear regression. So if you don't have your calculator, make sure you grab one. Then you press Stat. Remember, you can pause the video anytime you need to grab what you need. Then we're going to edit, and we're going to put these numbers in. So we have 3, 6, 12, and 36. Then if we go up and we enter, and I'm typing over, you can also clear your list by highlighting L1 or L2, press clear, and then arrow down. So I've got all my data in. Now we actually have to do the linear regression. So Stat, arrow to the right, highlight Calc, and then number 4. And then I'm going to store the regression equation by pressing Alpha Trace, and then pressing Enter for Y1. Then we arrow down. So this gives us our equation, which is C. So Y equals 20x plus 30, and like I said before, that y-intercept is always your starting point, so that is our registration fee. And then the monthly fee is going to be what's multiplied times x, which is 20. Okay, so for 48, some crops, such as barley, are very sensitive to how acidic the soil is. To determine the ideal level of acidity, a farmer measured how many bushels of barley he harvested in different fields with varying acidity levels. Find an equation for the regression line, and then we have to do some predictions. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video so that I can put my information in my calculator. I'm going to get started on that, and then I'm going to pause to enter everything in. So you hit Stat, then you press Enter, and now you can put in your data. I will show you, if you highlight L1, press clear and arrow down. Notice you can start with clear list. Okay, so my data is entered, so now I'm going to go Stat Calc 4. Then I'm going to arrow down at store regression equation. I'm going to alpha trace. I'm going to store it in Y, and then I'm going to enter through. So here's my equation. So Y equals 52.69 x minus 300.45, and I just rounded to the hundredths place. And part 2 says, according to the equation, how many bushels would the farmer harvest if the soil had a pH of 10? So I'm going to have to go to my table. So second table, and I want to go down to where it says 10 for my X, and it looks like I would harvest 226.48 bushels if the pH was 10. If the pH is 6, I would have harvested 15.7 bushels. Now, 3 says, is this a reasonable prediction? Well, the best place to look for that is your R value. Well, since we didn't make note of what that is, I'm going to go back and get my information again. Remember, you can arrow up. Now, once you get to the last linear regression, that's exactly what we just did. I'm going to press Enter and then Enter, and I can bring up that information. And hopefully you notice that this R value is the correlation coefficient. The closer that is to 1 or -1, the better the data is. So since it is 0.99, that is a great prediction. Okay, so you can write that in for number 3. Then on B, we need to do the same thing. So we're talking about ounces of gold that are traded by large investment banks and commodity exchanges, much the same way that shares of stocks are traded. Below is the table that shows the cost of a single ounce of gold on the last day. Use the calculator to find an equation for the regression line using x equals 0 for 2002. Then predict the ounce of gold on the last day of trading in 2009. Is it reasonable? So we need to make sure we look at all of our information before we go to our table this time. So when it says use x for 0 for 2002, I'm just going to start at 0 for 2002 and notice it goes up by 1 year. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, rather than using those years. So I'm going to stat, edit, and I'm going to pause to put in my data. Okay, so now my data is entered, so I'm going to stat calc and then 4. At store regression equation, I'm going to alpha trace. Now here's my regression equation, so that's going to be y equals 68.16x plus 334.3. Now I'm going to look, since it asked me, is this a reasonable prediction? I'm going to go ahead and look at that R value, and I'm going to say yes, whatever my prediction is, it's going to be reasonable because the correlation coefficient is really, really close to 1. So there's my equation, and then it wants me to predict the price of an ounce of gold in 2009. Well, be careful because now to get the number that I need to look at in my table, I just need to do 2009 minus 2002. So I'm actually looking for when x equals 7. So I'm going to go to my table, so second graph. And I see $811.42. Okay, so 49 we need to solve by substitution. So this one is set up really nicely for substitution. Since y equals x plus 5, I'm going to plug that in down there. So 3x plus x plus 5 equals 25. So if we subtract 5, then if we divide by 4, x equals 5. Now to plug that back in, the easiest place to plug it back in is right here. So y equals 5 plus 5. Y is 10, and if you needed to write it as an ordered pair, that would be 5 comma 10. For the second one, it's also set up nicely for substitution. X equals all of that. So I'm going to plug it in for x in the second equation. So 4 times y minus 2 plus y equals 2. Make sure you use those parentheses. 4y minus 8 plus y equals 2. So 5y minus 8 equals 2. 5y equals 10. Y is 2, and then we're just going to plug back in to find what x is. So x equals 2 minus 2, so x is 0. So our ordered pair would be 0, 2. Last problem, what are the value of the x-coordinate of the solution to the following systems? Well, these are set up for elimination because they are in standard form. First thing we need to do is see if we have opposites, and we do not. So I think it's easiest to make this 3 and negative 6 by multiplying through by negative 2. That would give us negative 6x minus 8y equals negative 58. So now we've made opposites. So we can add straight down. So negative 3y equals negative 15. So y equals 5. Now, it's only asking me for the x value, so be sure to not leave that as your answer. So I need to take this 5 and I need to plug it back in to one of my first equations. So 3x plus 4 times 5 equals 29. So if I minus 20, that's what 4 times 5 is, 3x equals 9. X equals 3 is the answer to A. Then for the second one, it's a little bit more difficult to get opposites. I don't really want to deal with the 7 and the 8. I would rather deal with the 3 and the 5 and make a positive 15 and a negative 15. So I'm going to multiply the top equation through by 5. So that would be 40x plus 15y equals 20. Second equation, I'm going to multiply. I need this to be a negative 15, so I'm going to multiply through by negative 3. So that's going to be 21x minus 15y equals 102. I've got my opposites. So that is going to be 61x equals 122. So x is going to equal 2 when you divide through by 61. Now that one, that's what I needed, so x is 2. Please make sure you also go in for tutorials with your teacher if you need extra help.